A few different superpowers in their time have tried their very best to achieve global peace. And the one that stands out amongst the rest when it comes to trying to accomplish the most evasive thing that has been known to mankind is, of course, the United States. Now, the US has been the catalyst for a bunch of different peace treaties across the globe, ranging all the way from World War One to, of course, the most recent war between Russia and Ukraine, and, of course, trying to level out a peace treaty between Israel, Hamas, and the rest of the Middle East that is currently against everything that Israel stands for. But where did it all begin? Well, it all started with the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles originally came to being in the year 1919 and was immediately after the First World War. A war that, for all intents and purposes, was extremely terrifying for the rest of the world to witness, because from a civilian perspective, you saw more loss of life than ever before. From a military perspective, it was something that nobody thought was even remotely possible. But once it happened, nobody wanted to leave any room or any margin for error for something like this to happen again, thereby rallying call for a treaty that solidifies the fact that the world would never go to war again. World War One would be the only war to have ever taken place. And yet, it all failed. Now, why exactly did the Treaty of Versailles fail, you might ask? Well, it failed for a few different reasons. Number one, all of the blame was pushed onto one country alone. Now, the harsh treatment of Germany has various perspectives to it. We can talk about severe reparations up to 132 billion gold marks at that time onto Germany, crippling the German economy. Or perhaps the war guilt clause, a particular clause that was mentioned under the Article 231, which essentially blamed Germany entirely for the First World War, fueling resentment and also leaving certain areas open for uprisings in Germany itself. Also, the treaty dismantled Germany's military in its entirety, limiting it to only about 100,000 troops. No air force, and most definitely no submarines. But what were the consequences from a political and economical perspective, globally speaking? Well, hyperinflation happened in the year 1923 in Germany, which further pushed the economy into tremendous turmoil. You're talking about 4 years after the original treaty came to being. Hyperinflation essentially refreshed people's memories as to how ridiculous things were for them in specific. Now, this treaty completely weakened the Weimar Republic and essentially made it extremely vulnerable to extremist movements, incubating the thought process for one Mr. Adolf Hitler. Now, this is where things, according to a few different historians, go from bad to worse. Because there was a rampant failure to enforce the treaty in itself. Now, France and Britain lacked the willingness, or essentially, some might argue, the capacity to enforce the treaty effectively. But where it all went to essential turmoil was the fact that the US's own Senate rejected the treaty altogether and said that they are not going to be joining the League of Nations, which was essentially put in place to avoid another world war. Now, there were also outright violations by Hitler once he was trying to come into power. Specifically in the year 1936, where the demilitarization of the Rhineland was violated blatantly when there were no major consequences. Also, the US kind of turned a blind eye towards what the call to action for other nations was. So, Italy put out a very prominent claim that it wanted certain territories, that had territorial demands, which were just pushed aside. The division of the Ottoman and the Austro-Hungarian empires, however, also created new yet extremely unstable nations in Eastern Europe and, of course, the Middle East. And all of this essentially surmounts the rise of extreme nationalism and a revenge ideology, wherein the German people essentially wanted to say that hey, enough is enough, we're not going to put up with this anymore. German nationalist movements become a thing, the Nazi party becomes a thing that is prevalent across Germany, and also uses this sentiment for all of their propaganda. Now, Hitler directly exploited grievances over the treaty to justify territorial expansion, and this is exactly where the incubation for the Second World War kicks in.